Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be talking about winning janitorial government contracts in 2025. Hi, Sarah. Good to see you again.
Hey, well, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, my friend. Okay, so let's just get right into it. I mean, janitorial contracts are a very big thing. It's kind of our specialty here at SAS-GPS, and we get kind of an array of different people. We get people who are, have small companies, wanting to get into the space, and we get huge corporations wanting to get in, to get into the space even more or win more, right? So Sarah, right off the bat, right? Why should people want to get into janitorial contracting in 2025?
So janitorial and custodial contracting is a really pretty stable government contracting business. The government spends hundreds of millions, billions on janitorial services every year. The contracts are often, we have a lot of set asides for small businesses or service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, women-owned small businesses even in the janitorial industry. And those contracts are fairly long. So they're stable, they offer recurring revenue, they're not something you have to rebid on a lot. You're typically competing against people who are similarly sized as you. The big corporate giants aren't coming into those set-aside ones. And the government's pretty reliable. We always like to say, we like to specialize, and we have specialized in many things, but we specialize heavily in construction and then janitorial, because if you build it, then you have to clean it. And the government owns a lot of buildings and they have to stay clean. So it's consistent. So it's not one of those things where the government's like, oh, you're no longer essential. Like even in COVID, right, when everything shut down, janitorial contracts continued, even though they had to have new COVID requirements, right? But janitorial contracts were, if not more important than ever. So yeah, it's pretty stable.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and definitely in this administration, we want to go after contracts that are stable and not just gonna disappear.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what registration or IDs do you need to bid on, to get on these specific federal contracts for janitorial?
Okay, so if we were talking about federal contracts, you're going to need to be registered on SAM.gov. You need to have your UEI number. That's going to replace your old DUNS number. Obviously, you're going to need to have put into SAM.gov like your NAICS code. Any of your small business designations you should have already through the SBA. So if you're a woman-owned, veteran-owned, those kind of things, you need to have gotten those certifications properly. And honestly, it kind of is an interesting thing, because if you want to do federal janitorial projects, you probably already know this information, because you're not going to just register on SAM.gov and get your UEI number and then go win yourself a federal multi-million-dollar janitorial contract. There's past performance on these federal ones that are, going to prohibit kind of janitorial startups, if you will. If you are a janitorial startup, I still recommend that you register on SAM.gov, get your UEI, start doing your research, put your NAICS code in, get your certifications, but you may have to team with someone, right? So maybe there is another custodial company who specializes mostly in the East Coast, but they want to start expanding and they need somebody to help them, with some Midwest work or something like that, where you can start getting some past performance. So you still want to do all those things, but I just don't want to start the video letting anybody think that you can just come in here, you can have 3 people that are ready to clean something, and then, or even ready to middlemanning in custodial for federal most of the time does not work. You need to do at least 50% of the needs to be your own staff. So, yeah. And the other thing that I did want to note when we are talking about registrations and IDs and things like that is that your registration on SAM.gov is not that complex. You should not have to pay somebody to do it for you. And most of the people who are offering to pay to help you get on SAM.gov are scammers. Obviously, if you might need a little help, if there's people with disabilities, there's all kinds of reasons that people could use help like that. I'm not saying that, but the registration on SAM.gov is not that complex. We do have small business administrations in every city that are there. Your taxpayer dollars pay for the SBA, and they can help you get registered, get with your Apex Accelerator, those kind of things, and they should guide you. And the SBA's quality does vary from office to office, but I always tell people we're mostly remote now. So if you don't like the answer you get from one SBA office, call another. Yeah. Sorry, SBA officers.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also YouTube videos that they can watch too on how to register for SAM.gov. It's, there's literally hundreds of them. Yeah. We do. I'll
Maybe
put
we
it
do.
somewhere
Yeah.
here on the screen here on the right.
Okay. Yeah. I was like,
But yeah, I mean, it's not complicated for sure. So then, like, what do you like? Obviously, like, there's a difference between like a startup and a small business, and I think sometimes on the internet that gets misconstrued because people think a small business is two people, and that's a startup, right? So like, how do you qualify? I guess for a as a small business, and what certifications do you need so that you can start winning, janitorial contracts and that?
okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the spending or like the income limit for a small business in custodial is 22 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's correct. So that's, I mean, some people watching this video are like 22 million a year. That's not a small business, but it is a small business by government standards. So that also kind of might like let you know if you're like ready to go compete in this industry, if you're going to be competing against people who might make $22 million a year.
Yeah.
Right. Then they're still considered a small business. So, you make sure that you fall obviously under $22 million a year, that you stay a small business. And then small business certifications, there's several different types. The most obvious is probably like a woman-owned small business or a minority-owned small business, right? Those are pretty obvious. If you're a
Yep.
woman and you own the business, you have to own 51% of it, I think. There's the service-disabled veteran-owned small business. There's also veteran-owned small business. So if you're a veteran or if you're a service-disabled veteran, that's where the difference is. The VA may work with, you may have to get some information for the VA to get that certification. But those are great set-asides because all the VA buildings, like the VA is very good at setting aside their contracts for VOSBs and SDVOSBs, right? Their preference goes to them as makes sense. So the VA has hospitals and the VA has other buildings, and those are primarily cleaned by SDVOSBs. So it's a great, if you are a service disabled veteran, definitely get that certification because the VA is waiting for you.
Yeah.
They want
No, 100%.
and wheelchair transportation, all kinds of things, anything related to the VA. If you're a service disabled veteran, they much prefer dealing with that. So that's a good industry. Then there's also something called Hub Zone. That has to do based on your business's location and where like you reside, and if it's like kind of a low income area or like places that need revitalization, they give you a Hub Zone certification for having your offices there. And then there's also something called 8A. 8A is also for socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. They put you with like a mentor protege. It lasts for like, a set number of years. 8A is a little bit more complex. You can't just go in and get an 8A. I think you have to have been in business 2 years.
Yep.
I think, do we also have a video on qualifications of 8A?
Yep, we do.
Okay, let's put that one up here so we don't have to waste anybody else's time. If you're interested and you think you would qualify, also literally Google SBA 8A certification and you're going to get the whole list of the things that you have to do. Google is your friend. So that's kind of like the rundown of the basic certifications. Certifications are important if you can get them because they give you those access to those kind of exclusively set aside contracts that are then less competitive and you're more likely to win.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's, I mean, any way that you can get ahead in the government space is always useful for sure. All right, awesome. So then now we kind of we know kind of the certifications that we need to have. So like, how do you then go ahead and find, opportunities to bid on in the janitorial space?
So SAM.gov is going to be your main search portal, especially in the federal space. Okay. Only in the federal space, I should say. And you want to learn how to search SAM.gov. You want to learn how to save your searches and track them. Use filters, keywords, know your NAICS codes, know your locations that you prefer, right? Those kind of things. We also have a video on how to use SAM.gov for searching. I know we have that one because I referred people to it all the time because I don't think there's a more important like skill that you should have. And then building your pipeline, if you're doing federal contracting, you need to know how to use SAM.gov. There are also pay services, pay software that you can use of all kinds. Like I'm not here today to sell a particular one. I have 3 that we subscribe to and I really like them. They also connect with SAM.gov though, right? But they give background and things like that. Some of them are quite expensive. So that's another way, right? But SAM.gov is free. and you want to set up, in SAM.gov lets you set up email alerts so that it tells you when there's updates or, new bids kind of in that area. There is also just kind of background research that's free. USA-spending.gov is you can go research past contracts or the money that the government has paid out to contracts, so you can see who has those contracts, right? What are those companies? Especially great if you're just beginning and you're looking for teaming partners, and you can see how much that they're getting paid. So if you are bidding, you can kind of do a little bit of research and see like how much was that contract worth the last time that it went up, so that you can get your pricing, in line with winning. There's also, depending on the agency, you should be tracking agency forecasts. If they have, industry days for that agency, go to the janitorial, custodial, or facilities maintenance industry days. You can reach out to your local SBA again. They might hook you up with your Apex Accelerator in your area. Apex Accelerator for minimal price, from free to minimal price, can help you identify and pursue contracts. And they often will give you advice on whether or not you should go for one. And that's kind of all federal. But there's also state and local procurement for custodial contracts that I don't think people should pass up, because just like the federal government, the state builds buildings and they have to have them cleaned. You will still have to have past performance, but your past performance requirements might be less, right? The smaller and smaller the government goes, the less that your probably past performance requirements are. Not always, though, because then you can get you can get a crazy city in Florida who thinks that for some reason you should have like 10 projects in the state of Florida in the last 10 years, who knows? But it does tend to be a little bit, I would say, softer on the past performance. And getting good state government contracts is going to look good when you move up to get federal contracts. The federal government will see that and like it. So
yeah, for sure. And then do you also recommend using SAM.gov for state and local, or what are you thinking there?
SAM.gov does not have state and local. So SAM.gov is a federal site. So each state runs their contracting their own way. So we could probably have a video on how every state runs it. For one for Texas, one for Florida, one for Wisconsin, one for California. In some cases, each department, right, has its own procurement. Like they might, the Department of Transportation over here has a, totally different procurement portal than the Department of Finance. It can be chaos and it can be hard to find. But if so the thing that I like about janitorial custodial in terms of this, right, is that if you are running a custodial business, you are boots on the ground, right? So you're not doing virtual work. So you probably have a pretty good geographic understanding of where you're working. Like if you are in New York, you're not looking at contracts in Wyoming, right? It's going to be really hard to get your custodial staff to Wyoming. So you're really, right? So you're looking at maybe like New York State. So you can go and you can start researching, how does New York, the state of New York contract for, custodial things? How do they contract just in general, really? And then you can get on the different portals and stuff for New York, right? Or whatever state. That's just an example. But because it is so much more geographically specific, I think you can kind of dig into that a little bit more and figure it out. And then in some states, even the local ones will go through like one nice funnel. And in some states, every single city, county has its own procurement site, literally. And there's thousands. And sometimes there's scraping companies that go scrape all these sites. And sometimes that's kind of worth like the couple $100 a year that you would have to pay to get. They don't have good access to the documents or anything. Sometimes I think they're a little bit tardy, but it does kind of give you an idea, or at least get a free trial and go check it out and see if you can see any patterns with some of those sites that scrape those state procurements.
No, I think that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yep, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, hence why we kind of help business in that aspect, right? Just to find the right contract, because there's
these videos so that people can find good quality work and do and go get it.
Yeah, and I know it's not a question that we had here, but I want to take a couple minutes just to chat about it, right? You mentioned the word middleman, right? Which is right now kind of trending in the space. It's something that, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there and a lot of people out there saying, hey, you can get rich, by just being a middleman. and being the visa between the government and a company that you can offset the work to. So is that true in the janitorial space, or like in what scenario is that actually feasible in your
I get a
experience?
lot of people calling me really wanting it to be true in the janitorial space. Like they want to be able to have an office, and then they just like find people like find another company. They're like gonna go get the contract somehow. I don't know how. And then they're gonna get somebody else to do the contract for them. And I would say it's absolutely not true. In fact, I think in the federal space, most of these have actual rules. If you actually read the contracts for these federal janitorials, that if you're not doing 51% of the work yourself, that you're not even like you're not qualified, and if you lied about that and they catch you, like you're gonna be in huge big bad trouble, and you
Yeah.
might owe the government money, or like I mean, there's serious penalties for that, right? So like it's not a it's not really a middleman approach. There are ways of, I suppose, teaming or maybe some joint ventures that are like more like lawyer stuff that you would need to know, but it's generally not like you're not going to be a pass-through company for a janitorial contract for the
Yeah. And
federal government anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
And do you say that? Do you think that for the state and local, same thing too?
Yeah, maybe not local. There's less regulation, there's less people checking.
Hmm.
Maybe I always think, okay, so I'm like, okay, like how do I put this? If you're not boots on the ground checking the work that's being done, being hands-on with your staff, actually investing in your staff, keeping good staff, right? Like, and not just like assigning this. You're not just going to sit in an office and somebody else is going to do all this work for you and you're going to make millions of dollars. That's not how this works. It's just not how business works. It's not how life works. I wish, really, I do, because I would do it in a heartbeat, right? We all would. But really good janitorial companies, they staff well, they give their employees good compensation, they pay them well, they keep them on staff, they go down, they visit their sites, like they're involved. Management and ownership is involved in these companies, and we work with a lot of janitorial companies that are large. And some of these people, women too, have owned these businesses for 25 years, and they're still going down and they're checking on these things. And these people have made themselves multi-millionaires, but they are working, right? Like they're working, they care about their business. It's their business. And that's like, I tell people, if you can have good quality, you do a good job, you don't mess up, you cross your T's, you dot your I's, it's yours, you own it, you could do really well in the janitorial space. But if with the federal government, like if you mess up a little bit, right, you get a bad CPARS or something, you're not getting another contract.
Yeah.
So maybe you do figure out how to kind of middleman at one time, but it's the moment that you lose control of that project in any way, shape, or form, like you're done. And that's a temporary solution. And I would hope that we all want to be long-term successful.
Yeah. I mean, I also see it as like, like from on the local space, maybe it is manageable to do it because maybe like the contract requires like 2 or 3 people. But again, like if you mess up at that level, you're never going to get to play where you want to go, which is like the contract that's worth like millions of dollars. So like, do you want to risk your reputation on the fact that you could leave it to other people? Right.
Yeah. And I mean, at some point you have to ask yourself too, like, why would anybody work with you? Why would anybody if they can go get this contract themselves, let's just say I have a company and I've got 3 people and we clean, right? And then you come on, you're like, hey, I can get this contract with, the energy company in the city. Let's just say, let's go small, right? Like, and I will take, 50% of your profit. You go do the job. Like, why would I not say, well, how about I'll just go get that job and I'll give myself 100% of that profit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing? Unless I'm a person that owns a company, but I can't get a job. I don't, how I own a company. Like, it doesn't necessarily always add up and make sense. Like you have to bring something to the table. Now there may be like, you might come in and say like, hey, we will manage your company, right? We'll do your accounting, we'll do your books, maybe we'll do your people management, we'll do your payroll, right? Things like that. Maybe you could come up with like a teaming agreement or something like that. That makes sense. But you got to bring something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you're
No,
really
for sure.
talking about sort of like joint ventures with
Yeah.
businesses, not more than
Then you're not a
middleman.
middleman, then you're part of the main
Yeah,
project.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
And again, I think it's good for people to listen to that because, like, like we deal with companies all from all sizes, right? That have like 100 employees or thousands of employees, and the companies that are starting to get into the space and they want to learn, from the big boys that are doing it well. I think it's very clear to hear this, like, like don't mess up on the little things because, as you said, right, once the government gets a hold and they don't like you, they just don't like you. That's it.
We have a really successful janitorial contractor that we've worked with for 25 years. We do all their bids. And we took them from being basically a startup, like just start entering the federal space, right? All the way to being, they're not a small business anymore, right? Like, and the man who owns it, I cannot use names, right? But the man who owns it is like 90 years old and he still shows up to the meetings with us to make sure that our proposals are good. And he still checks on his on like boots on the ground. And he hired from within, brought those people up, and he runs a really, really, really successful company, and it still feels like kind of almost like a family-owned company, like his
Yeah.
company, and that's how he like just accelerated the pace of that, right? Is just like, well, that and we're helpful too because we won those, right? We do good proposals, so that gets you the wins, and then you produce well on the wins, and we'll help you keep getting them. That's kind of how
Yep.
we like to work.
Absolutely, my friend. Okay, so then kind of putting that aside now and having like and hopefully the audience has a clear understanding of like what we don't want them to do. How do you price your janitorial services? And what is the Service Contract Act that that when you Google like how to win janitorial contract, it's going to pop up, or if you use ChatGPT, it's going to tell you like you look at this, right? What are those things?
Okay, so there's wage determinations for your contract. Depending on the location, you need to absolutely pay your people the minimum pay, right? And their benefits, their government mandates X things that you have to do, so you need to be aware of those. And that's kind of where the Service Contract Act, I guess, comes in. Right, you have to meet wage requirements, and things like that. You have to give the right holidays, vacation, sick leave, so you have to factor all of that in. How many people are you going to need to clean this? What kind of skill level are they going to have? So your pricing is kind of its own beast. Like we have price to win specialists that just work in just this particular area, right? But you build basically a pricing model. And then you need to be able to have kind of flexible pricing models so that however the solicitation is asking you, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's per square foot, right? Maybe it's by task where they're wanting you to kind of like, line item those costs, and you're going to need to have them. And then on top of that, right, you have your wage requirements, you have the materials that you're going to need. So you really need to have a very detailed plan of how you're going to do this. Like, and if they have site visits, you should absolutely go visit the site because, up high cleaning is much more complex than like, it takes different equipment.
Yeah.
So you need to know what kind of floors it is that you're looking at your cleaning, right? Those cost different things to clean. Right. So there's a lot that goes into pricing, especially for custodial and janitorial. And then, of course, after all of that, you still need to make some money. You need to pay yourself, right? And you need to put some away so you can reinvest in your business. So overhead and profit, that can be tricky because you want to win, and government contracting can be tight. We've lost at 4% overhead before, right? Somebody was willing to go with like 3.5 or something, but we generally say maybe 5, 6 to 10% overhead. I've heard people do 15 and win. It just depends. Make sure that in that solicitation that you follow that pricing format, and also plan, if you can, as much as you can, risk manage, right? For
Sure.
how long is this contract, and what are the prices of things and paying people going to look like, a couple years down the road when I still have this contract, right? And some of that is risk management, right? So you have to, like, it just is like, you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if tariffs are going to enter the picture suddenly, and all of your costs are going to go up, right? And so you do have to kind of gamble on that plan a little bit. But some people are really good at that, and maybe you need to find somebody who's really good at it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and that's kind of why we have, I mean, like, we have specialists on our team that's literally their entire job. It's just building those models so that they can successfully win bids and everyone's profitable, and the government is happy.
Yes.
Yeah, that is it's a fun time.
Yeah. I don't work
Awesome.
pricing very often.
Yeah, it is. Pricing's it's a beast for sure. All right, and then kind of moving into like the requirements. Like, what are some of the requirements that people should be aware of, during contract performance when it comes to like janitorial stuff?
Okay. Any government contract, I tell people, keep your records. Record keeping. I like to call myself the paperwork squirrel. But really, keep your paperwork forever for until you think it's ridiculous. And then there are record laws. I think some of them you have to legally keep for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
If you have HR compliance issues, you may have to keep those for longer, 5 years, things like that. So make sure you pay the correct wages and that you can prove it. Follow your hiring rules. Make sure you're doing your I-9 verification. If you have security clearances, obviously you're not even going to get on there if you can't do your paperwork for your security clearances. But, make sure you're following all those hiring rules. You will probably have to submit a quality control plan, or at some point you're going to have to give a quality control plan. You want to stick to that quality control plan, and you want to document when you inspect and how you stick to that quality control plan, right? Again, there is limits on subcontracting. Make sure you look at that solicitation and what the contract is going to look like in terms of limits on subcontracting so that you are ready to do the correct amount of work yourself with 50, 51% or, whatever it is. And only perform work in scope. So let's say that there's a side building. They're like, oh, can you go just send one of your people over here to do this job? No, you can't. You need that formally in writing before doing that extra task, right? That helps protect you. And that's not saying that you can't add services on. In fact, you probably want to, right? Do they need more from you? Absolutely. You should do more for them, right? That's great. But you do need that in writing. So again, paperwork, as an addition to your contract, right? Because it should be, you are incurring a cost for that. And so you need to be compensated for that, right?
Yeah.
So everything needs to be formalized, invoiced properly, always invoice on time. The agencies will have very specific invoicing systems that they want you to use with them anyway, depends on the agency. And then always look at that Buy American Act as well, because a lot of times domestic products might be required depending on what you're doing. That's very true in construction, but I'm not sure about custodial, all of the different things. I don't think you're gonna have to prove that your broom was bought in America, for instance, you know what I mean? But different things. So, but it is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's super helpful. I mean, I think just understanding the little nuances, right? Because I feel like every vertical that we work with has its own little nuances that that aren't some of them carry over, obviously be compliant with your contract. It's duh, right?
And you always keep your paperwork. I'm always surprised. I'll be like, well, go read your contract, and they go, we didn't save our contract. I mean, you didn't save your contract. I'm gonna have a heart palpitation, but I love paperwork, so
yeah, no, for sure. So then kind of, going into that route of succeeding in this space, right? How do you ensure that you have successful performance and position your business for future contracts that you can win?
Yeah, do a good job. Document yourself doing a good job, communicate well. If, is really kind of the long and short of it, building a relationship with your contracting officer, making sure that you're doing exactly the documentation your contracting officer has. If they have an issue with you, you should address it immediately. Do not wait 2 years later to say oh, you didn't really like the way our management was working. Maybe now we'll address it, right?
Right.
Keep a professional, reliable workforce. They are the face of your company, right? Track your costs, make sure that you're maintaining profitability, adjust if you need to. If you have to adjust something that is out of scope of your contract, you need to have a good relationship with your contracting officer because you need to be able to talk to them about it.
Yep.
You may be getting CPARS evaluations. If you're getting CPARS evaluations, you want to stay on those. You want to prepare before they come out so that you kind of anticipating what your CPAR score might be. And then if you get a CPAR score that you did not think you deserve, especially if it's bad, like if you get a bad CPAR score, you should be protesting, and then hopefully you documented really good so you can prove that that is not an accurate CPAR score, because your CPAR scores will be used as your past performance documentation for the next thing that you try to bid on. And if you have bad ones, a lot of times it can just immediately disqualify you. So pay attention to how they are rating you, especially with the federal government. And if you're doing really good, and maybe ask for some reference letters or some accommodation, like commendations, right? Things like that you could put on your website, or, maybe you can't put it on your website. Maybe it's got a security clearance. You can't say you're there. But like something that you could use in a future proposal, right? Or as a piece of document to show that you did a good job if you did get, like, right now, contracting officers are like a revolving door, because with the Doge things, a lot of people quit. A lot of people took that buyout. So they're trying to, put new contracting officers in all over the place. So you might just get a randomly new contracting officer, and you might want to say, hey, look, our last contracting officer really liked us, right? Let's see. Always continuous improvement. And, when your contract ends, if you don't get win it again or whatever, exit professionally, do exactly what the transition plan out, be courteous, do a good job. Yeah. I think that's kind of
there's one more thing here that I wanted to. Yeah, and there's one more thing here that I wanted to add, right? Because this is a phrase that has stuck in my head with my conversations with you, my friend. Is like you should start bidding on new contracts the moment you win your first one, right? And obviously in this case it's going to be useful because, like, if you have an active contract, you have past performance now, technically, right? So talk to me about that. Like, how does that like strategy work into what you should be doing as a business?
Okay, so you should always have a business development plan, right? And when you have a contract, obviously you want to get your feet under you. Don't just go ignore the contract that you have to go get the next one. Do a good job on the contract you have, but as soon as you sort of have your feet under you, go and start looking about expansion, right? Like, you have this one under control, go get another one, because then you have sort of a revolving door of contracts, because contracts do end and you might not win. All right, you might not win the next one. So if that's your entire business is this one contract, right? You've sort of fallen onto it, and you don't have another one. You lose that one, then you lose your whole business, right? So we kind of want to we recommend that people sort of have kind of a couple of contracts, and then they're kind of always looking to the future. I mean, what do they say in capitalism? If you're not growing, you're shrinking, right? You're dying, and this is absolutely capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not pure capitalism right here in government contracting. So I do always say, kind of keep your eye on the future, right? And a lot of times when you get a government contract, especially if this is your first one as a prime or something, and it's a lot and you're having to really expand and really do a lot, it can feel very, very overwhelming. I think just don't forget to invest, and that in the future, right? So.
Yeah, no, 100%. I guess the last question that I'll ask you, is something that I bet you, everybody has thought about. Like, what are the recent changes in policies or changes that have happened under the Trump administration, right, that could affect the government contracting and your strategy in the janitorial space?
Yeah. Well, I just mentioned contracting officers are being rapidly changed, right? So a lot of people are feeling kind of insecure, in their contracts, because they've suddenly got this new person they don't have that relationship with, or they don't have the communication channels as well with, or things. But there has been some policy changes. There is still going to be changes. At the time that I am speaking about this right now, probably tomorrow something will be different, right? But there's been some regulatory rollback, right? They're supposed to be simplifying some processes. Transitions to some of this may be bumpy. They're supposed to be consolidating more things under GSA. That may mean more larger contracts, less small business contracts. I don't think that that's a win, but that may be a truth that we see. They're going to definitely be tighter compliance on Buy American, right? No cutting corners on your sourcing. They definitely have been talking about reducing the small business set aside goals. Had been brought up, I think, to 15% under Biden. They're talking about 5% or having none at all. That I believe that this week it went to somewhere in the court system. Don't quote me on that. I'm not here to talk politics at all. I just know that that's something probably if you have one of those set asides and this is something that you rely on as your business strategy,
for
you
sure.
might want to keep an eye on. If you ever did any DEI, don't. Well, not only do you not have to, but like you might get in trouble. Climate initiatives, green things, those are scaling back some still, so that may have at least less impact on your evaluation scores. There's been a non-displacement rule that was revoked, I think, where you don't have to rehire incumbent staff. And then we're seeing, money move from different places, right? So defense spending is supposed to rise. I haven't seen that yet, but like it is. ICE is definitely expanding. We're seeing more ICE need, like at the Department of Homeland Security, right?
Sure.
So there's just going to be some shifts. But there was a couple of contracts out recently for, cleaning detention centers because suddenly they're much fuller and they are expanding them. So
yeah,
you can kind of look at.
Yep. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be some changes. There's definitely going to be some changes happening under the Trump administration. But yeah, I mean, keep up to date. Follow us on the channel, subscribe, and we'll keep you guys updated if there's anything that changes or in any space, because this is kind of what we do.
Check back again in 4 years because it'll happen again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's always a time of transition. This transition has been particularly disruptive, and of course, there's people who think that it needed to be disruptive. The people who think that this is terribly disruptive. It doesn't matter necessarily how you feel about it. It's still changing, and you need to pay attention.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll put the links. So we'll put the links to SAM.gov, GSA.gov, USAspending.gov. We'll put all that in the description below so that people are aware, where they can go ahead and look at that stuff. But Sarah, yeah, I thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I'm glad that we got to go really in depth and understand what does it take to win in the janitorial space. And we're going to be linking all the stuff that we talked about in the video, but we appreciate you guys' time. And if there's any questions you guys have, comment below and we'll get to you. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sarah. I'll see you soon.